and welcome to another Fast Take. I'm Rod Rodriguez. Last week, we were talking about corrupt contracts, children falling out of windows, and do you even care? And this is, the Fast Take. I've got Rose Thayer here, Stripes reporter, who interviewed and put that story together. Rose, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Rose, what has happened since last week? Do we have any updates?
We do, yeah. So the episode came out in the middle of the week last week, and then on Friday, two senators, Senator John Ossoff and Senator Ron Johnson, sent a letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin asking him to do more investigations and do more to hold housing companies accountable. And particularly, they reference Balfour Beatty, a company that's pleaded guilty to criminal charges last year for fraud.
What kind of fraud? I'm just very curious. Do you know?
Yeah, they were manipulating work orders, so it looked like they were solving housing maintenance problems faster than they were, which is important because that's how they get bonuses and extra financial payouts from the military.
So I want to talk about last week's episode, and this is a great follow-up piece that our elected officials are being informed. Our military officials are being informed. Everybody seems to be on the same page that military housing has a problem, and these private housing companies and the agreements between these private housing companies and the DoD, there's a huge problem there. Before last week's episode, we prefaced it with a re-release of a tenant bill of rights and dead infants on Fort Bragg. And that was all about these contracts, these agreements. We kind of fast forward to your episode, and we're still talking about these, for lack of a better word, corrupt contracts. And we even talked about children falling out of windows with a very simple solution. And a lot of these housing companies are like, that costs a lot of money. They're literally putting a price on the life of a child falling out of these windows. Now, I say all this to come to this question for you. And it is the question that we beg at the title of this episode. Do you even care? It feels like people care. But once again, and we mentioned this in the last episode, these stories do the worst in terms of people listening, people sharing, people discussing this. Now, if I talked about aliens, if I talked about UAPs or weed coin, oil, crypto, or anything in Ukraine, we get numbers. And that's fine. Those are very important stories. But we're talking about you, the listener. We're talking about service members, their families. If you're a veteran and you got out, you're living the life and your civilian life, and you're doing good, this is still a story about your brothers and sisters in arms. Look, I've got two kids in the military right now. They live in barracks, and they're looking at me like, this place sucks. And I'm like, you should go visit housing. So, Rose, why does it feel like no one actually cares?
I think that's a really great question. I wish I had a good answer or a way to change it, or just to fix the problem in general, so we didn't have to ask people to care about it. I will say Congress, even if, podcast listeners aren't tuning in, Congress is definitely trying to get information on this. They've held probably just as many hearings this session as they did back in 2019, after the Reuters news agency sort of broke the news again on how bad family housing had gotten. So, these families that are in difficult situations do have the ear of lawmakers. But again, in a military where so much of your life is wrapped up in your unit, your command structure. It's important that the entire military understands that this isn't over and done and solved, just because the people that are stuck in difficult situations need to rely to the people to their right and left and their leaders for help and for understanding.
One of the discussions we had when we were putting together the last episode was whether or not the Tenant Bill of Rights was a legal document or whether it was feel-good rhetoric. It reads like feel-good rhetoric. It reads very political and very feel-good, a little woo-woo, as Joe Rogan might say. Everybody deserves safe living. Everybody deserves this. Is there a lot of words and verbiage in there about deserving life and liberty and the pursuit of good housing, that kind of thing. It didn't seem like a legal document. It seemed very, I think I used the word analogous. Maybe I'm using the wrong word, but it definitely felt, I think I said earlier, it was like jelly language. It didn't have any, it wasn't firm. It just kind of went everywhere. And it felt like language written by lawyers for lawyers, because there are so many ways to interpret these things. Like what does your right to safe housing look like?
I think, that point is exactly what Rachel Christian, an advocate for safe housing, was trying to make. Safe housing is interpreted differently all across the country and by all different types of people. She mentioned that in Hawaii, where, there was no water for days, weeks, I'm not sure the exact period of time for residents there because of the fuel leak. They did it. The Army did it. I think it was the Army did a great job of moving its residents because they didn't have water in their homes, and that constitutes safe housing. You have to have running water that's safe to drink and use. But not all services did that. And I know there was some pushback as to whether or not people did need to be relocated in the absence of having safe drinking water coming from their faucet.
This episode is brought to you by Tecto Gear, TEKTOGEAR.com, a Portland, Maine-based tactical knife company. The knives are created by the CNC process to provide the best precision, functionality, and beauty. The Tecto Gear knives won't cost a half month's rent either. Today, Tecto Gear is giving 15% off the entire purchase. Go to TEKTOGEAR.com. Use the discount code STRIPES. That's STRIPES. Go to TectoGear.com and use discount code STRIPES and save 15% off your entire purchase. I'm always interested in how things are connected. I look at our housing issues, and I look at the level of corruption, and I dare somebody to challenge me that this isn't a form of corruption of some sort. If this is happening between the DOD and privatized housing, money, contractual obligations, legal loopholes, and whatnot, if they're doing this to our families, service members who have raised that right hand, taken the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against foreign enemies, foreign and domestic, if they're doing that to your family, what are they doing to you? What about that body armor that you're about to put on and go into the next war? What about that equipment you're riding in? What about that safety belt inside of your troop carrier that you're about to strap into and trust to save your life? All of these things are built on contracts. All of these things are built upon a mechanism that we all are supposed to trust, that the builder, the civilian contractor, has the best interests. They're thinking about the soldier, the Marine, the airman, the sailor, the guardian. They're thinking about these people. But if you just look at your housing situation, it's obvious they're not. So when I feel like when I hear people talk, when one of the things I've heard when I brought up housing issues with civilians or even veterans is, dude, it's been like that forever. There's like this,
Mhm.
like like people have given up on this, like it's ever going to get fixed.
It's similar to, the barracks. I talked to a soldier at Fort Hood. He's since left the army and been quite vocal about sort of the bad condition that his barracks was in. And he said he was told multiple times by first sergeants, well, that's how it was when I was in the army. So why are you complaining? It's the same. Um, and it didn't seem to matter. He said that he was telling them, like, this isn't the policy. The army policy says I'm guaranteed this amount of square footage. And just because you didn't have that square footage as a soldier doesn't mean you can ignore the policy.
That's interesting because I think that these companies are also very aware of the way that the military moves. Nobody's really on station for more than 4 years on an average.
Yeah.
3 to 5. And that's just that 5 is a stretch.
Mhm.
So if you get a new commander who's hardcore about like, hey, I'm going to advocate for these soldiers and their families, and I'm going to hold this this company accountable and feet to the fire, it's almost like they can just outweight us. They're like, it's okay.
Mhm.
You can jump up and down and wave the flag and say, I'm going to fight for these Marines and these airmen and soldiers and so on. But you're gonna leave. I'm gonna stay. I'm a
Mhm.
civilian. I'm a CEO or a COO or CFO or whatever, or even a manager of a housing company or housing office. You're not going anywhere. You can stay there for 10, 15 years. Your
Yep.
longevity, you're fighting. How do you fight that idea that we can outlast you like the Taliban?
I think that the bonus structure being contingent on maintenance records was part of that, right? If you keep these houses in good condition, no matter who's living in them or for how short a time, you'll get a bonus. You'll get financially incentivized for doing that. But it doesn't seem to have been working.
I feel like the incentive should be keeping your job. It feels like the
Yeah.
incentive here should be you keep your contract. Um, I've seen government contracts, with for a year or 2 or 3 even, and you got your option years and whatnot. But when you're locked into 30, 50 year, these crazy contracts, these crazy land contracts, it's so draconic. It just doesn't
And
seem like we're in the same universe as modern contracts.
and at this point, technically the companies own the houses, even though the military still owns the land that they sit on. So for the military to leave some of these contracts, they would have to buy those houses back, which is one of the big detractors. Because I think just doing that would probably cost. I think Representative Wasserman Schultz said it would be billions of dollars just to buy the houses back.
How many houses could we have bought back with some of these failed Joint Strike Fighter super cool jets? I wonder. I don't know. Look,
That's math for smarter people than me.
or not, because it's obvious the smarter people aren't making the smart decisions. So maybe it is math for us.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it is. I just look at this and I don't like to double. I don't like questioning some of these projects, especially warfighter stuff. A jet is a jet. It's very
Well,
important.
I don't even think you have to go that far as a comparison. For example, I wrote a story when Army Futures Command moved to Austin, Texas. The Army worked with Lend-Lease, one of their private housing companies that manages Fort Hood, to buy property for the at the time it was 2 general officers and a command sergeant major. So the Army spent several $1,000,000 to buy 4 properties in Austin. One of those they tore it down and made it a parking lot. It was literally a $1 million parking lot at the end of it. And the money they spent on those to house 3 senior leaders was almost the exact same amount of money they were spending to renovate about 900 homes at Fort Hood that had a known failure that was allowing water to get in. So you don't have to look at fighter jets. You can look right within the housing itself. And I'm not saying a general officer doesn't deserve a house at the same caliber as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, but
the numbers
it's a tough pill to swallow.
It is a tough pill to swallow. The numbers don't add up, and it just seems like a nasty business. Folks, this was your Fast Take. That was Stripes reporter Rose Thayer. Rose, where can people find your articles and reach out and talk to you about story ideas?
Yeah, you can find all my articles at stripes.com. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Rose_Lori, LORI. And then you can always email me at thayer.rose@stripes.com.
Awesome. And as always, you can find more good old Military Matters podcast stuff. We're on Twitter at StripesMMPod. And you can shoot us an email at militarymatters@stripes.com. As always, make sure you like, listen, subscribe, and share. And folks, share this podcast. This episode especially. I think this is the one that this situation matters to me because I've lived on military housing. I've been in a situation where, it looks like a horror movie is trying to spread through your bathroom, through your ceiling, and it's mold. And you're told to just deal with it. You've got children, you've got pregnant folks at home, you've got babies and whatnot. This is an important situation. It's an important topic to discuss. And it's important that we put the pressure on our elected leaders to actually do something. Tenant Bill of Rights sounds great in theory, but I think that as service members and veterans, we have to get past sounds good in theory and get really down to it looks good in application. It looks good as we actually do it instead of, woo-woo, make you feel good, placate the masses, drink this and look the other way kind of nonsense. But yeah, that's where I'm coming from. All right, folks, that was Rose Thayer. I am Rod Rodriguez. This was your Fast Take, and we'll see you at the next episode. This episode is brought to you by Tectogear, TEKTOGEAR.com, a Portland, Maine-based tactical knife company. The knives are created by the CNC process to provide the best precision, functionality, and beauty. The Tectogear knives won't cost you half a month's rent either. Today, Tectogear is giving 15% off the entire purchase. Go to TEKTOGEAR.com. Use discount code STRIPES. That's STRIPES. Go to Tectogear.com and use discount code STRIPES and save 15% off your entire purchase.